Hi folks, Tom McHale with American Handgunner Magazine here again from SHOT Show. I have got a special guest. Mr. Adam Kraut is the Executive Director of the Second Amendment Foundation. I am quite confident that all of you have heard of the SAF. You're probably somewhat familiar with the SAF, but I think we're going to talk about some things that you may not know. And, before we get into it, one thing I think we need to make really clear is there are a lot of gun rights organizations out there. A lot of them, they tend to focus on different aspects of the fight. You know, for long-term success, we've got to have wins in the legislative arena. We've got to have wins in the courtroom. We've got to have public opinion and public relation wins, all these things. One thing that has always impressed me about the SAF is you guys dominate the courtrooms.
We try.
We were chatting a bit before this, and I know it's kind of like it's your bread and butter. You told me that you really don't worry about the legislative side. Other people do that. This is where you specialize. And a little known fact, remember that little case McDonald? I think most of our listeners will be familiar with,
Sure.
with that one that kind of cleared up the whole right to bear arms thing after Heller. Well, no matter what you heard, you know who was responsible for that? These folks right here. So I think our mission today is to talk a little bit about what you're doing now, where your focus is, and most importantly, how people can help you accomplish your mission.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Going back to McDonald for a moment, McDonald's the case that opened the door for us to be able to sue all the states, local municipalities, city governments for violations of the Second Amendment. So,
Right.
Heller opened the door and established that it's an individual right untethered to militia service.
Right.
And from there, we got to deal with all these states. So 2 years later, you get McDonald, and then the floodgates have just opened to litigation ever since then. The circuit courts, as we all know, for a number of years played games with the test that was established in Heller.
Right.
Bruin comes out. The Supreme Court says not only is there a right to bear arms outside the home, which we also said in Heller, but here's the test. And not only here's the test again because you guys got
Right.
it wrong for so long. So we put it in bright flashing lights
Right.
2 different times. The Second Amendment Foundation, since our inception, we've been involved in over 260 lawsuits. That's either as a party, as an amicus, or funding challenges where we
Right.
weren't on the papers themselves. And as of today, we have 58 active lawsuits, with one I just filed this morning while here.
58 lawsuits.
Yes.
I mean, and I think the one thing that people need to understand with what you do is the strategic nature of these lawsuits. I mean, it's a interconnected jigsaw puzzle, right? I mean, you hit on the very basics of it a second ago, talking about Heller. Okay, that established there can be arms that are an individual right. And then McDonald took it a step further and said, yes, we can keep and bear them, which opened the door for states, right? And corporation, as if I'm getting my legal terminology
Yes.
correctly, where states kind of have to toe that line as well. Which, boy, that opened the doors for those for
Yeah.
all your lawsuits, right?
Yeah, for a vast majority of them. And, you want to talk about the strategic nature of the litigation. Right now we have 8 assault weapons ban challenges and 6 on magazine capacity.
Okay.
When you look, generally speaking, what you're trying to get a case to the Supreme Court, there's usually one of 2 ways, ignoring what they actually do with it when it gets to their doorstep. But one is a circuit split.
Right.
So you have a couple of different circuit courts reaching different conclusions, and the Supreme Court looks and says, okay, we need to settle this area of law
Right.
and level the playing field so that everybody's on the same footing and everybody has the same understanding.
Right.
Sometimes, though, there's something so egregious that the Supreme Court will just take because it needs to fix it, and the justices
Right.
have said, we need to deal with this issue specifically.
So something out of the Ninth Circuit, for example, right?
Well, oddly enough, so there hasn't been a gun case out of the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit is the most overruled circuit, generally speaking, out of all of the circuits that we have.
Yeah.
And you look at, there's a law review article I recall reading. You look at the Ninth Circuit from Heller until Bruin, I think there were 50 different challenges on Second Amendment grounds in the Ninth Circuit.
Right.
There's not one of those that where the plaintiffs who brought the case one that survived the Ninth Circuit en banc
Right.
review. And it's been interesting to see. We had a case out there, and I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head, but I think it was actually one of our COVID challenges when they shut down all the stores. We won at the panel, so
Right.
a 3-judge panel, and the city or the county petitioned the court for en banc review, which means that the court as a whole, more judges come back and they can overturn or uphold the panel decision.
Right.
And their petition was basically, please, Ninth Circuit, help us. We lost.
You're on our side, right?
Right.
Help us out. in slightly different words.
Sure.
I take it, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So just before we came on the air, actually, I was flipped up on my computer. I saw yet another lawsuit that you filed today or recently.
Yeah, it was this morning.
Maybe we can educate our listeners on what's going on there.
Yeah, so we filed a lawsuit in the Western District of Pennsylvania challenging the federal prohibition on medical marijuana users from being able to possess firearms and ammunition. It's been a big problem for a number of years now. ATF, I think in 2016, revised the 4473 to include a warning that, you know, if you use marijuana, even if it's legal in your state for medicinal purposes, it's still unlawful federally. And it's amazing how many people still to this day do not know that that is in fact the case.
Right.
I'm from Pennsylvania. Even our former governor, Tom Wolf, said that, you know, getting a medical card would not affect your gun rights. Well, maybe not in Pennsylvania under Pennsylvania law, but under federal law, it's a total prohibitor. So in Pennsylvania, we have just shy of 500,000 registered medical marijuana users. And when you extrapolate that across the 38 states that have medical marijuana available, you're talking about millions of Americans that are disenfranchised from their Second Amendment rights simply because they opt to use marijuana to treat whatever symptoms over opioids that can be prescribed, which would otherwise be unlawful and things like that.
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of see this case as a much broader target area. Really, to me, again, I'm a novice in the law. It's almost a state's, I'll use the made-up term states' rights, right? But I mean, it's in our society, states have the ultimate power. The individual has the ultimate power, but then we trickle up, not down, you know, to federal, local, county, state, and then finally, last on the list is federal government.
Should be.
And this is really states, and where I'm going with this, states have made decisions through their electorate that, okay, we're going to allow medical marijuana, we're not, whatever those decisions are. Now the federal government is coming in and saying, no, that's federal offense.
Yeah, and so, you know, what we're hoping for ultimately, obviously, is a win in the courts. And even if we're successful here in the government, let's say appeals and we go up to the circuit court and we're, again, successful, we're talking about Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware as the affected states by a positive decision. So that still leaves the rest of the country. It would be great if Congress finally took up the issue and either descheduled marijuana completely or created some kind of carve-out for, medicinal users. And there's a number of states that have also legalized it recreationally. We started with medicinal. Let's see where we get with that. We may come back around. I don't know yet. But it's unfortunate that those people have to actually make a choice. Do I use this to treat my symptoms, or do I exercise my constitutionally guaranteed right?
Well, and you have to think, and I think people need to realize the consequences of that form, of that piece of paper, are enormous. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's up to 10 years.
$250,000, $10 fine
for filling out that form incorrectly or fraudulently, I guess is the
Well, typically what they do, and I have experience with this, unfortunately, from working behind a gun counter before I started practicing law. But typically what they'll do is they'll refer prosecution to the state authorities for false statements, which, depending upon state, can be a felony, and that also would eviscerate your right to keep and bear arms. So there's a number of things, but the prohibitor being caught, with marijuana and a firearm or ammunition or both would be the 10 years, $250,000 fine, potentially.
Well, and I think with any law on the books, per se, a prudent citizen has to assume the worst-case scenario. So the worst-case scenario, perhaps, is a federal government, a federal administration that is rabidly anti-gun and decides to start making examples.
Yes.
Right? So, I mean, you have to assume the worst.
Yeah, and we've seen some successful challenges post-Bruin on this exact issue, not on medicinal marijuana, but in the criminal context where people were actually prosecuted under 922G3.
Right.
And they brought challenges against the constitutionality of that law and have been successful in those. So this lawsuit was one that I drafted the complaint for back in the summer of 2022, and I've been looking for a plaintiff for a very long time, very quietly too.
Right.
Now that it's out there, I'm looking at trying to find a few more in a couple different places to hopefully either do a circuit split or alternatively more relief across the country. And, hopefully, as I said, again, Congress take up some kind of positive action.
Right. Okay. So tell us about... I'm curious as to your insight on what future issues are going to be. I mean, we're all very familiar with quote-unquote assault weapon bans and magazine capacity issues and these things. looking at your crystal ball, what do you see as looming threats on the horizon from a legal standpoint?
So right now, I think the biggest ones that we can talk about, and I can try to maybe go to the crystal ball route in a minute, but right now it's going to be all the things post-Bruin. So sensitive places, permitting, requirements for the permit to carry. So, you look at California, for instance, there are jurisdictions that require psych exam. They require the individual to pay for it. They limit the length of the permit to a year. There's exorbitant costs associated with all that. So everything that they can do to restrict the actual right to bear arms, those are going to be, I think, the new focus for right now. The jurisdictions that have assault weapons bans, are they going to maybe attempt to strengthen them until the circuit courts or Supreme Court weighs in? Yeah, possibly. The magazine capacity, once they've set that capacity, I'm not sure they're going to come back to that well.
Right.
So it's things like that. 18 to 20-year-olds is another area where there's been a lot of activity over the last couple of years as far as right to bear arms, purchase. And those are things that we have challenges actively across the country. Actually, prior to me joining SAF, I, as outside counsel, picked up a case for them challenging the federal prohibition on 18 to 20-year-olds purchasing handguns in West Virginia, which we won, and that's now up at the Fourth Circuit on appeal, just getting started. I think the government filed its brief actually yesterday or the day before.
Yep.
So.
Okay. What else should people know about what you're doing these days? I mean, I know it's infinite. I mean, I literally get emails or press releases. I want to say daily, but it's darn close to it if it's not daily.
Yeah,
about all the things going on at SAF.
So there's obviously the legal front is our bread and butter. The educational component of the organization does exist. That's something that I'm looking to strengthen during my time here. It's something that I'm hoping to put some time into this year because I think, as you alluded to in the beginning, making changes in the legislature, in the courts, and then, of course, society as a whole, you need to educate people on that issue, both young and old. So I have some ideas that we're going to get to work on this year to try to help bolster that educational component because if you can win people at that level, it translates over into the legislative side at least, and then the courts. It's going to be whatever the courts are going to be. So those are kind of some of the things that we're concentrating on. Also, our messaging and marketing and just general awareness of the organization is something that it's not as well known as some of the others, even though we've existed for 50 years. This is our 50th anniversary this year, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's an exciting year for us. There's no shortage of work for us to be doing, and we're here meeting with people to help us do that work.
Well, we definitely want to help get the word out. What can people do to best help you?
Well, money always makes the world go round. So joining as a member, donating, and really the word of mouth is probably the biggest thing if dollars are not something that are, available for people. Just telling the world about us, what we do, taking a look at our work. When I came on board, we went through a slight rebrand, so the brand is a little more fresh. We redid our website. We now have case pages for each individual case that tells you a little blurb about the case, has the documents if you're interested in reading them, things like that.
Well, I tell you, just dealing with a lot of nonprofit organizations just in any field, there is not much more direct in terms of return on investment than donating money to the SAF. You can literally write a check and you will receive updates on, okay, here's what happened, here's where we are this week, here's the courtroom we're in this week. I mean, you've got to pay the lawyers and you got to fund the legal battle, and that is just pure cash, right?
Unfortunately, it is.
I mean, that's fine. That's fair to ask for. I mean, I think people need to know how important that is, because it doesn't mean you choose a gun rights organization. It means you support multiple battles. You support the battle in the courtroom right here. You support legislative battles elsewhere. Don't be the single organization supporter out there. So.
Right. I mean, a legal case in just the district court, so the trial court and the federal level, it can be anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000.
Right.
And that's just round one.
Right.
That doesn't include any of the appeals, cert petitions to the Supreme Court, en banc rehearing. If it goes up to the Supreme Court, like our second case that gets granted and then vacated or remanded, and we go back down, it can be a very long and frustrating process. And I think that's one of the other things that's really important to touch on real fast is that the legal process isn't overnight. It does take time.
Right.
Courts have a number of things on their docket, including criminal cases, which take priority over the civil cases. So when people get a little antsy about it and want to know why isn't this moving as fast, is because the courts have a lot, and sometimes some judges just don't want to deal with the issue, so they kind of push it off to the side a little bit.
All right, I really don't want to stump you here, but if you had to guess, how long do you think it takes a case to go from square one to the Supreme Court on average? And I know it varies with a million different factors, but I mean, years?
I would say you're probably looking at least 3.
Yeah.
Give or take, and it's going to depend on what happens in the case. There's a number of different pathways, whether or not you're looking for a preliminary injunction. If that gets denied and you appeal that, and then you go to the Supreme Court after the fact, whether it's just straight shot through the trial court up to the Court of Appeals and then no en banc. But about 3 years, I would say, before a cert petition is a likely potential. It could be longer than that.
So that's what I want you all to know. We have to support them indefinitely. I mean, this is where it's happening. Your money is not better spent elsewhere, I tell you. So how do people reach you? How do they get started in becoming a member and supporting you financially?
Sure. So the best place would be our website, saf.org, so saf.org. At the top, there's a Give Now button or a Join button, so it'll take you to the appropriate place depending upon what it is you want to do.
Okay.
On social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they're LinkedIn, and we do have a small YouTube channel that doesn't have a lot on it right now, but that's something that, as time goes on, we will be building on.
Yep. Okay. I could bring live footage from the courtroom someday. Just kidding. Okay, well, that's great. I really appreciate you coming to join us today and help educate our viewers and listeners on what we all need to do. I was the classic poster child of this. I just recently joined the SAF, within about a year or so ago, I guess. So I was late to the party too. So don't make my mistake. Get involved now.
Great.
So, thanks again. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Okay.